Miami 2025. After this race, McLaren led the championship with 246 points, with Mercedes in second with 141, with an extra 36-point gap to Red Bull Racing and Ferrari 47 behind. But on a day Mercedes would celebrate a podium with Russell, this would actually be their last so far this season, and only 3 races later, Ferrari would now somehow overtake them in the Constructors' Championship with 165 points and Mercedes on only 159. And hey, even Red Bull are now closer, only 15 points behind Mercedes in 4th on 144. This triple header was straight from hell for Mercedes, and today I'm going to go over all of the incidents that took place for this triple header with Mercedes, which has now led them to stop being the favourites for second in the Constructors' Championship, and I am going to give my opinion on the entire situation. So let's head straight into the first race of the triple header. Now, this race weekend actually started off not half bad for Mercedes. In practice, they didn't look too bad, and going into qualifying, at least on one of the sides of the garages, it looked like it couldn't get any better. George Russell actually managed to get P3 on the Saturday, just behind Piastri and Verstappen. He even outperformed on qualifying one of the McLarens, which was Lando Norris in P4. So it all looked like Mercedes would be carrying on with the status quo, getting extra points on Ferrari, as again the Ferraris, they had a stinker. They were only in P11 and P12. However, to put a spanner into the works, Antonelli's side did not do too well. Antonelli, coming to his first home Grand Prix, had actually only managed to get P13, as we had all this tyre craziness with the mediums actually being faster than the softs for quite a lot of the teams, and that meant Antonelli and Mercedes were taken by surprise and knocked out. However, like I mentioned, with Russell in P3, it looked like they were still going to be completely fine heading into the race. But my oh my, could it have not gone any worse? Straight away, George Russell could not hold back Lando Norris, and he went on to the 2-stop strategy, and it was definitely the slower one. He then got screwed over by the virtual safety car when Esteban Ocon's car gave up on him, now at the bottom end of the points paying positions. This did help Kimi Antonelli a little bit to get up to P8 in the standings. However, what didn't help Antonelli was what was about to come.
Antonelli, who's pulling over. Well, the local hero will not see the checkered flag.
Antonelli's car had a mechanical issue and he was out of the race. Meaning, at the end of the Imola Grand Prix, Russell was able to recover to P7, which was not half bad. But with Antonelli's DNF, and Ferrari having an incredible turnaround on the Sunday, ending in P4 and P6 with incredible race pace, and even Verstappen improving to actually win the race, it was the worst way to start a triple header for Mercedes. They had only actually managed to get 6 points in Imola, and Ferrari managed 20. A very big cut to their lead in second place. But hopefully their fortunes could improve in Monaco. They definitely did not. Monaco was even more of a nightmare weekend for Mercedes. Qualifying, as we know, at Monaco is so crucial to having a great weekend here. And even before qualifying, Mercedes just didn't look anywhere. It looked like Ferrari and McLaren were the ones to beat. With Verstappen always in the mix, you know he's always going to be about. And even though Mercedes' pace didn't look absolutely terrible, what happened on qualifying was just a disaster class. Antonelli almost got knocked out of Q1 just on pure pace, then trying to get out, binned it into the wall on the chicane, then meaning his car could not partake in Q2, meaning he was definitely going to start in P15. What could George Russell do? Well, his car gave up right at the start of Q2 in the tunnel section, and that was it for Mercedes. They qualified P14 and P15 for the race on Sunday, and I mean, we got 4 overtakes at Monaco. They were never going to be able to recover at a circuit like this, and for Antonelli, it actually just got worse. Mercedes just left him long, hoping for a safety car, and it didn't work out. He ended up in P18, and even though George Russell managed to get up to P11 after trying some interesting moves on Albon, after V-Carb and Williams were doing some great team strategies to make sure they got double points, it just wasn't enough. P11 was was still a decent recovery from George Russell, but it was too many team games going on with the mandatory 2 pit stops. Mercedes came out of Monaco with 0 points. And to put more salt into Mercedes' wound, Ferrari managed to get P2 in this race, with Verstappen and Hamilton also in the top 5. This was genuinely the nightmare situation. It only could have got worse if Leclerc had actually managed to go and win the race. So after 2 races at this triple header, Mercedes was still only on 6 points. Now in Spain, it actually looked a little bit better for Mercedes. In practice, they looked like they were half decent again, definitely on the pace with Verstappen and the Ferraris, and in qualifying, this is exactly what they showed. Qualifying P4 and P6 set them up perfectly for the race, with Verstappen just ahead of them, and the Ferraris P5 and P7. Again, it looked like they could at least maintain their little bit of a gap they had now that had been closed up by Red Bull and Ferrari, and potentially just score some good points for once this triple header. But my oh my, was it Imola once all over again. They qualified half decent, but the race was just a nightmare. To start off, going into lap 1, both the Ferraris managed to get past George Russell, meaning Russell had to do a lot of work in the race to just get past Hamilton again. And then come lap 55, it just went all downhill again. Even though Russell had managed to get past Hamilton, Antonelli sadly had another DNF to his name.
Listen in.
There's just nothing he could do. It was another mechanical issue with his car, meaning 0 points for him, and he brought out the safety car. And genuinely, Mercedes got very lucky that Mad Max was unlocked for this season, because if Max hadn't had his bit of craziness, gotten the 10-second penalty, I mean, Russell was lucky to have escaped that, to be fair, they wouldn't have even got P4 with Russell, it probably would have been P5. But P4 in the Spanish Grand Prix, it just wasn't good, considering again, Ferrari, their closest rivals, had a P3 and a P6, completely out-dominating them on points scored. Meaning, this whole triple header, Mercedes only actually scored 18 points. And this was really bad, because Ferrari had managed 71 points. And this was enough of a points difference between Mercedes and Ferrari for Ferrari to now be second in the Constructors' Championship as I'm speaking, heading into the Canadian Grand Prix. How? They had such a big gap to Red Bull and Ferrari, and it's just gone within 3 races. Their great start to the 2025 season completely eradicated. And like I mentioned at the start, this has led to people questioning who now is the second favourite in the Constructors' title, as points-wise at least, you'd have to say it's Ferrari now. Ferrari seem to be improving a little bit more consistently, plus points-wise they are ahead, meaning they have the clear advantage over Mercedes. It might not be a big advantage, but it's a slight advantage. And then Red Bull aren't far behind. I would be surprised if Verstappen was able to hold on, but if they keep getting only one driver finishing Mercedes, Verstappen will beat the other Mercedes driver. So that could be really detrimental to their season as well. And this is why I've made this video, because what do I think about this situation? Who do I think's now going to get second place in the Constructors' Championship? Well, for me, I still think it's going to be Mercedes. Now Ferrari are ahead of them right now in the Constructors' Championship, but Ferrari have a few issues, and those issues are Lewis Hamilton just really isn't clicking with that car at the minute. He just looks so down after Spain, and if this continues to affect Lewis Hamilton, it could really put a stop to how many points Ferrari could get if he loses a bit of motivation. Plus, Ferrari look way too inconsistent from track to track who looks good, because they have tracks like Monaco, but then they have tracks like Miami, and if Mercedes, who have looked a lot more consistent, just constantly get at least one driver in the top 5, I think that's enough to get them over the line in P2 in the Constructors' Championship. This season actually reminds me very much of the 2023 season. You have an absolutely dominant car running away with the Constructors' Championship. You had Max Verstappen winning basically every single race in that season, absolute domination. And then this season, you've got McLaren winning most of the races. They've won the Constructors' Championship, but you've got a very tight fight for P2 in the Constructors. And to put it into context, Mercedes just about pipped Ferrari that season, only 3 points ahead. So if it continues the way it continued in 2023, in 2025, it's going to be very close, and these decisions and issues with Mercedes will come to bite them in the arse if they are not careful. But that is also why I think they should be fine, because reliability's never been an issue for Mercedes. So I do think that they can overhaul this and get their car to just start getting over the finish line more often than it is at the minute. So like I mentioned, for me, P2 in the Constructors' Championship, I still think Mercedes are going to get it, but I now think it's going to be a lot harder for them to do this, and it's going to be a very close between Ferrari and Mercedes at the end of the season. I don't think, like I mentioned, Verstappen in the Red Bull will be able to hold off, but this kind of brings me over to the final section of the video, which is more of the fun facts since the triple header. And the first one is, if Kimi Antonelli hadn't had any of these DNFs, where would Mercedes be in the Constructors' Championship? Well, I can tell you, Mercedes would have an extra 10 points from Antonelli's results. Not crazy, but those 10 points would keep them in second place on the Constructors' Championship. Only 4 points to Ferrari, but that 4 points gap probably would have stopped me making this video, because if Mercedes was still in second place, yes, it would have been bad for them, but my oh my, it looks so much worse now seeing them in P3 from where they were after Miami. Completely backing up what I mentioned earlier about the DNFs and these small strategy calls that will pay so much heading into the rest of the season. These small calls win or lose you championships. Ferrari had it in 2024, losing the championship to McLaren. They had it in 2023, losing it to Mercedes. And if Mercedes continue this way, they're going to lose to Ferrari because of these calls and these issues with their car. Fun fact number 2, and actually, if Red Bull hadn't cocked up Verstappen's safety car strategy and just left him out on the softs, because those softs were not terrible, I full-heartedly believe Verstappen probably would have got overtaken by both Piastri and Norris, finishing in P3, but that P3 would have given Max Verstappen an extra 14 points to Red Bull's tally, and with George Russell now only finishing P5, losing 2 points, it would actually put Red Bull 1 point ahead of Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. So there was a scenario where these issues actually affected Mercedes so bad they dropped from P2 to P4, and then that would have been incredibly worrying coming into the Canadian Grand Prix. Fun fact number 3, and this is actually nothing to do with Mercedes, but Nico Hülkenberg with his P5 finish actually outscored the entire points that Sauber got in the 2024 season all in one race. This is why Nico Hülkenberg's the GOAT, my driver of the day for the Spanish Grand Prix, and I still think this is one of the best driver changes that Sauber or one team has made, because like I mentioned, midfield teams or lower back teams need a driver like Nico Hülkenberg who is consistently getting up there when we have these crazy races. He may not get you podiums, but guess what? Sauber don't need podiums at the minute. They need someone like Nico Hülkenberg. And then finally, fun fact number 4, not so fun for Max Verstappen, but he is now only 1 point off a race suspension. Now, it's nothing to worry about realistically coming into the next few races, as 2 of those points are going to get wiped off at the Austrian Grand Prix, basically battling with Lando Norris last season. Remember, got a little hustle-tussle last season and he picked up 2 there. However, what makes it more interesting over the long run is Verstappen has to hold these 3 points off his race suspension up until the late stages of the second part of the season. So that's more worrying, because he can get a penalty point or 2, but if he has another one of these big crazy Mad Max moments, he could pick up 3, and again, that's enough to get him that race suspension. So he needs to be extremely careful with what he does for the rest of the season, because it's not completely off the cards that he does go and get a suspension. But I think this would only happen if the championship really did slip away from him completely and he just had nothing else to lose, so he was going crazy. But anyway, that is all she wrote for this triple header and my opinions on Mercedes at the minute. Comment down below, how do you feel about Mercedes? Do you believe, like me, they'll be able to recover up to P2 in the Constructors' Championship by the end of the season? Do you think they'll be able to resolve the issues they're having with their car at the minute? Will Ferrari keep being the second most consistent team on the grid? Will Verstappen be able to hold on to both of them? Again, I don't think so, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, if you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe. It's been a pleasure. I love making these videos, especially when we've got a week off from the racing. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to have a nice rest of your day. Have a nice rest of your week. And I will see you all next Wednesday for my Everything You Need to Know video ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix and my Friday post FP2 for F1 Fantasy. Take care, everyone,